All right, well, welcome everyone. For those that I haven't met before, my name's Eric Nordberg. I'm the Dean of Libraries here at UT Martin. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out. It's a beautiful day outside, so coming inside to hear a presentation may not always be the top of your list, but thank you so much for joining us. A little housekeeping, if you haven't been in this building before, restrooms are down this way at the back on the left. Refreshments here that you can help yourself to throughout the presentation and afterwards. I want to thank our library faculty and staff who helped with the setup for this event and the promotion for it. A lot of people keep saying this is a great event series that you're doing, Eric, and I actually do very little. So I'm very thankful for everyone here in the library who helps us to promote these events and get the word out. I think it's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad to see that we're starting to build an audience for these events as well. This is the UT Martin Research Series. It's also got some other things special today, but as I've said before at these events, a lot of people think about UT Martin as a teaching institution. And we do a great job teaching, don't get me wrong. Most of our faculty are teaching a full load, 4, 5 classes a semester sometimes. But in addition to that high level of teaching excellence, each of our faculty are also involved in their own research agenda, their own research activities, and those research activities actually extend to and include students on this campus. And not just graduate students, but undergraduate students in a lot of different ways, and staff across the campus here. And so really our goal is to try to highlight that research, bring that up for people's attention, just because it doesn't get as much attention as the teaching work that we do. So next couple of events, just for your knowledge, if you want to be back here at 12 noon on Wednesday, April the 6th, we're going to have the LCD Trio. That's Liz Alexander and 2 other faculty members in the music department, and they're actually going to talk about how their research is composing, and they're actually going to perform some music during that event, so it should be a nice activity. And I think, again, it points out all the different types of research that happen on a campus like this. We do lots of different things here, so please come out for that. We also extended this series to be a collaboration with the Martin Public Library, and so the final event for our spring series is going to be on Thursday, May 19th, so after commencement. It's going to be an evening event at 6 o'clock, and we're going to have Jack Grubaugh, who's a faculty member in the biological science department. I saw that. We love Jack, because Jack is awesome. And Jack has a lot of research that he does on fish, on birds, but he's going to talk a lot about the work that he does with insect research. He's also a crack photographer, and so I have no doubt that that presentation is going to be illustrated with some pretty incredible photos that he himself has taken. So you can keep an eye on our Facebook feed. That's where old-timers like us post information about what the library's up to. You'll also find lots of posters and things here in the department. We're also using Runway a lot, so have a look there for these events, and if not, come in the front door and ask at the front door. We're talking a lot about these. I want to thank Dustin and Damon, who've been helping with our live stream for these events. We also record each of these presentations when we can, so that if you can't be here at an event, you should be able to play that recording back, and I'm hearing that a lot of people are enjoying that component as well. I do want to stress, though, that we want these events to be in person. We appreciate the fact that people come and talk to each other during a social event. They can talk to the presenter about their research. And really that's the difference now that we're coming back out of the COVID isolation, is that you do have a chance to interact with human beings again and talk to them about the work that they're doing. So plan to attend an event as you go. As far as an introduction today, Dr. Rachna Tewari is our speaker. She received a BS in agriculture and an MBA in India before she came to the US, and then she got her master's degree in agribusiness, agricultural business economics at West Texas A&M, and then went on to get the PhD in 2013 from Texas Tech. She joined our faculty here in 2013, and just a couple of years ago, 2017, was promoted to associate professor status. She's going to talk today, as you may have seen in the promotion, about her research into the economics of groundwater management and how climate impacts are having an effect on food source, food availability. And that was even before we had a war going on in Ukraine, which is further affecting food resources and will continue to impact us in the months to come. She gets involved in a lot of projects. I meet a lot of faculty on this campus, and not as many who have as many things going on as Rachna does. When I first came here, I learned all about the UTM Mobile Energy Classroom, which was a cool project. Is that still going on?
Well, because of COVID, yeah. Kind of.
But if you haven't heard about that project, you should talk to her about it. It's pretty cool. Currently, she's working with what's called the CLASS Initiative. That's an acronym for Climate Literacy for Agriculture and Sustainable Societies. And hopefully she'll talk a little bit about that today. That's supported actually through a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So this is also a person who's being very successful working with Alicia Melton and her crew in getting external funding to support projects that not only advance her research agenda, but then impact the way that our students learn. So it's really a snowball effect where these things happen together. She's also an advocate for UTM students. I had a look at her resume. This is a person who is always doing something with a student group, usually in the agribusiness world. When I got here, North American Colleges and Teachers of Agriculture team, National Agricultural Marketing Association team, Tennessee Academy of Sciences team. She had a team that was successful in what was called the UTM Skyhawk Venture. I don't know if many of you were involved with that pitch thing that they did. Those students were successful. And she's had multiple teams that go to the Quiz Bowl for the Agricultural and Applied Economics Association. These are professional associations that she's connecting her students through her work. And so again, a tip of the hat. She was previously named the Hardy Graham Distinguished Professor, has been a recipient of both the Ray and Wilma Smith Faculty Development Award and the James Cunningham Outstanding Teacher Scholar Award. It's not a surprise then that I get to add another accolade to that, and for that I'd like to introduce Dean Todd Winters to come up and tell us a little bit about the added bonus that she's got today. So Todd?
Thank you, Eric. It's a pleasure to be here, and pleasure to be here with Rachna Tewari. Rachna and I, we actually started about the same time. I think I started July 1st, and she started August 1st of 2013. So we've grown as Skyhawks together, and I have to say she's exceeded me. When we talk about the word scholar, I can't think of anybody on campus that exemplifies that word more than Dr. Rachna Tewari. You heard the accolades that she's already done. She's a publishing machine.
Oh gosh.
There's no one that even comes close in our college that does that, and the grants that she's brought in. I think for the last 3 or 4 years, she's always had a federal grant that she's been doing her research off of. So she's just one of those faculty members that every dean wants to have on their staff, and she's just done a wonderful job. But I'm here to announce that she is actually this semester's featured scholar, and if you came in and saw the display, and Rachna, we're just so proud of everything that you've done, the things that you've done with students. One thing, I'm not even sure if you know about this, we did a poll over in Cooper Hall at the LLC about what they like about the College of Ag, and one of the top responses was Rachna Tewari. That was from her students. So she's more than just a researcher. So again, I want to thank you, Rachna, and I think she deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, Dr. Winters. Thank you. Thank you.
So I can also point out that in addition to your applause, the featured faculty scholar in the fall and in the spring semester actually also gets a $1,000 cash reward, or award. I guess it's a reward as well, but so that will be something that she'll be able to, I'm sure, apply to her research, not just to a trip to some nice place for spring break. But with that, I hope that you will also help me welcome Dr. Tewari, not only as our featured faculty scholar, but as our presenter in the UT Martin Research Series. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, is everybody able to hear me okay? All right. Well, thank you. This is very humbling. I don't know where to begin, but since we have to go with the presentation, I have to begin somewhere, right? So, all right. So again, my name is Rachna Tewari. I'm an associate professor of agricultural economics in the Department of Ag, Geosciences and Natural Resources, College of Ag and Applied Sciences here at UT Martin. And today we are going to talk about a topic that seems very general, but I'll talk about a few things that are involved with these areas which I think concerns everybody here in one way or the other, right? So water, climate, and agriculture. We typically reserve acknowledgements to the end, but I think it's a good time to start with acknowledgements. I think it's a great time to start with talking about how we got here, what are some things that I have been so fortunate to work with, or some folks that I've been so fortunate to work with. So I'll start with obviously our sponsors for these grants, you know, the USD and NEFA, the Tennessee Corn Promotion Board, of course the UT Martin research programs, UT system. There's quite a few different sponsors, so I've not listed them, but thank you to all of them that provide these opportunities for us as scholars, as teachers, as faculty, to promote our students. I think that's great. And then definitely Dr. Winters from College of Ag and Applied Sciences, and Dr. Sartain, our department chair from the Department of Ag. You guys are just so encouraging all the time. You know, anytime we go to them for any kind of support, they are always ready. So we appreciate that. I think all of us faculty do. So we are really fortunate to be working with them. And then obviously the UDM Office of Research and Sponsored Program, and Alicia and her group. And I want to give a shout out to Jennifer Cooper. I know she's not here today, but she's amazing. Every time I submit a grant, my collaborators are always like, oh, your grants office is a joy to work with. That's what I hear. So I do have to give them a shout out. She's amazing, you all are amazing. So thank you for helping us. And then of course, a few of my faculty mentors and colleagues, I want to in particular mention Dr. Paula Gale, Dr. Joey Melhorn, Dr. Mark Simpson, who I've worked with on grants, but they have also been amazing mentors to me. When I started here in 2013, they showed me so many things. So I'm always indebted to all of them. And then of course my better half and my in-house critic and motivator, you know, so Dr. Isaac Lepcha. So I'm always looking to him for advice and support, and I think that really helps also. And then of course my student researchers, I don't want to name all of them today here, we'll probably talk about them in the presentation, but definitely all of them and all these amazing colleagues that I get to work with. I don't think any of this is possible without collaboration. I really believe in that, I really do. Collaboration is very, very important. Okay, so today my outline or the research focus is mainly into three areas. One is the economics of groundwater management and climate impacts on agriculture and food security. I also do quite a bit of multidisciplinary and multi-institutional collaboration with developing pathways for student success in research, particularly in the areas of climate literacy, agriculture sustainability, and food security. And then, as many of you would agree, that we do have significant teaching commitments, so it's a good idea to also involve that in your research program. So also some scholarship of teaching and learning, but for today's topic, since we are focusing on water, climate, and agriculture, I'll mainly focus on the first two here. Okay. So I'll start off with the economics of groundwater management. This is something that I'm really passionate about, just because it's kind of also my expertise area throughout my graduate program and the time that I spent in Texas before I moved to Tennessee. I worked with quite a few different agencies in that area. So obviously this is something I like to work with, and also I had the opportunity to put into practice with policymakers, people involved in agriculture and climate related issues in those areas. So in particular, I worked with what is called the Ogallala Aquifer. I'll talk about this in just a minute. This is one of the largest USDA ARS initiatives in the country that sponsors programs on water research. So that's something that is big in Texas, obviously, because there's so much research going on water. So that's one area I've worked with. Then, of course, I've also worked with Mississippi State after I moved to Tennessee. Worked with some scientists in the Delta region at Mississippi State Water Institute for policy planning for their water resources in the area. So that includes surface and groundwater. And then I also am working currently with Arkansas State, because they do a lot of rice research there. And as some of you probably know, that rice does involve a lot of water. So there is a big focus. So these are some of the areas I've been working with. For the purpose of this talk, I thought it would be nice to do like a little case study where it would be like an example of the kind of research we do. So this will give everybody a little idea as to the kind of research that happens in these kinds of projects. Okay, so this is almost like a sample study of the kind of things that we do in this area. So this study focuses on climate change scenarios, which are just future projections, and their impacts on groundwater resources and agricultural economy of the Texas High Plains. So we'll talk a little bit in detail about this, but of course this can be related to just anything that is affected by climate today. So we were talking about the issues in Europe today, right, and close to Ukraine and all that area. All of these issues simply exacerbate the problems of food security. And on top of that, if there's like climate issues coming in, water resources issues coming, it's definitely going to impact our food supply. So these are issues that pretty much concerns every agricultural production area in the world. Okay, so we'll start with some discussion on groundwater in the Texas High Plains. So this area is particularly a very productive economy in the country. Some of you who may be familiar with Texas, you know that there's a lot of agriculture, a lot of cattle production, which also requires quite a bit of water, but also a lot of irrigated agriculture. Also, a lot of agriculture in Texas is dependent on groundwater because they don't have a lot of surface water available. There's not a lot of lakes and rivers. We don't have that problem here, thankfully, but a drought year comes in and then we realize that, right? So these are things to be always conscious of when we think about agricultural research, I think. So in that particular area in Texas, there is this particular water resource which is called as the Ogallala Aquifer. It is also known as the High Plains Aquifer, and this is one of the largest aquifers in the world. Okay, this is a self-confined, unconfined aquifer, which simply means that this is the only recharge to it is snow water and rain, snow melt and rain. That's the only way that water recharges. And obviously, when you are withdrawing huge amounts of water for irrigation, the rain and snow melt in that area is not as much. So there is a big mismatch between the water supply that's drained out versus the one that goes in as recharge. So they are definitely seeing huge declines in water resources in that area. So this particular area is completely dependent on irrigated agriculture. There's very little rain-fed agriculture, or worse, till these issues started cropping up. And on an average, about 19 billion gallons of groundwater is being pumped. And this aquifer not only just provides water to Texas, but also all these 8 different states. So you can see it's really sitting in the heart of the country. And it is a very important water resource for all these areas. And they are big agricultural states, if you can see on the map. You know, Colorado, Texas, Nebraska is also a big one with cattle and agriculture production. So some other issues that are kind of making this problem even more evident in these areas, especially in semi-arid areas, is the regional projections for temperature and precipitation. So if we look at climate projections for precipitation, we can see that towards the mid half and the last half of the century, you can easily see temperatures that can go up in the range of 3 to 6 degrees Celsius, all the way up to 12 to 13 degrees towards the end of the century. That means the climate is going to become hotter, quite hot, right? And then obviously the precipitation projections talk about anywhere between 20 to 40% decrease or decline in precipitation. So that means we are going to see 2 things. Climate is going to become hotter and drier. So obviously there's not much recharge happening to these groundwater sources. And there's still continuing withdrawals because they are dependent on that. There's not really much surface water. So given all of this, we came up with a research objective. And just to give you all an idea of how these studies are typically conducted, I didn't want to make it like super technical so that everybody will be able to see what we are doing, is that these are generally regional studies, because most of the climate-based studies are generally done on a regional basis, but then they're also downscaled on a local basis. So most of the studies are like county-level studies. We get analysis done for a county, and then we kind of combine everything to do studies for the region or the state or multiple states altogether. Okay? So for the purpose of this, I'm going to talk about county-level research that we did for changes in 2 particular areas. One is changes in farm income, because obviously that is a direct indicator of profitability, and then also changes in cropping systems. So what's happening to the crop mix, or what kind of crops will be grown when water supply is affected or water requirements are changing. All these things are going to make a difference to the kind of crops that are grown in the region, the kind of profitability, and obviously it's going to impact overall agricultural involvement in the region. Okay? So that's our study objective. So for the purpose of this, for the purpose of this talk today, I chose a county called Hale County. This is a pretty productive, very important agricultural county in pretty close to the South Plains area, right below the Panhandle. This is where all the big cattle production is, and this is where most of the cotton production is. So about 70% of the total acres in this county are completely irrigated. Only 30% is dryland. And out of that, 60% is exclusively cotton production. So some of you who are familiar with Texas, you may know it's big cattle and cotton production area, right? That's kind of the big crops there. Of course, there's corn and other dryland crops as well. Most of the irrigation happens is through what is called the center pivot irrigation. Some of you who probably drove or probably have a chance to go to Union City every now and then, you might have seen some irrigation systems. Those are the ones. We also have one on the farm. These are called as center pivot irrigations or sprinkler irrigation. These are supposed to be a little bit more efficient irrigation systems in comparison to the flood irrigation, where we simply flood the fields with water. They have a little bit better efficiency. So those are the kinds of systems that they use in that area. The economy is about 138 industries. A lot of these industries are related to the cotton production. There's a lot of cotton gins, there's a lot of other kinds of, ethanol plants and such. And then there's an employment of about 19,000 people. So it's pretty significant, important county for that area. So first thing is we use all these climate models to use historical data and plug it into the climate models and try to find future projections as to what the climate would look like. So here is an output from the different climate models we use. These right here are the 4 different climate models. They are just different climate models that were developed by different sources. So we generally try to use 2 to 3 to 4 climate models so that we are not just dependent on one single climate model. So we want to see variability to see what are the different changes or what are the different alternatives that these models are predicting, because each model comes with assumptions. And these assumptions are based on a lot of things. It's based on the way people will start thinking about climate change, or the way people will start thinking about carbon emissions. How are they going to think about scenarios, future scenarios of making a balance between reducing emissions versus technology, a lot of different things. There's assumptions that go into it. So based off of that, we get, for example, this is precipitation projection. So you can see that there are so many different climate models we use, but bottom line is that depending on which climate model we used, we can see quite a bit of variation in precipitation. But more or less, we are going to see a 20 to 30% decline in precipitation, which is also what the national study that I showed very early on, 20 to 40% reduction in precipitation. So it was quite similar to the county level too, when we looked at that. So we are going to see decline in water, rain-fed or water through rain, okay, or precipitation will be definitely lower. That's what we came up with. Once we get these climate inputs, these are used as inputs into what are known as crop growth response models. So these crop growth models are simulation models, and the idea is for you to use these climate parameters such as temperature, precipitation, temperature minimum, temperature maximum, which are important parameters for crop growth, right? Crops are definitely going to be impacted by that. And to that we adjust a lot of other things in the model, like the type of soil, the type of inputs that we use, production practices, conservation practice, a lot of different things, and that gives us some outputs in terms of how the crop will respond to all these parameters. So they are going to be almost like indicators of crop growth. To that we add some other things like hydrologic data. Some of you who may be meteorology majors or took a class in geosciences, you may have heard about things like saturated thickness. In other words, what is the depth of water that's available to pump? How deep is a well, for example, right? What is the kind of soil that we have? What is the conductivity? All those technical things that we use for hydrologic data, that's also input into these models. And then we use, obviously, economic data. So that is data like market prices, crops, input prices, labor. We are talking about gas prices all the time, fuel costs, all these geopolitical issues that exacerbate these problems. These are also input into this model, and then we discount this based on inflationary conditions, because obviously you cannot make predictions for 2025 based on the price that's happening today. Why? Because there is going to be inflation. So we adjust that for what is called as discounting, which is kind of a future value of what the current investment would be in the future. So all these are used as input to our economic models, which is where people like us come in. So obviously this all you must have already assumed that or thought that this is all collaborative research. So the climate scientists, they helped out with obviously climate modeling. Then we have these plant scientists, they help out with crop response. And then people like us come in, because I'm an ag economist by training, we use all their inputs to predict what are called as economic impacts. And these are typically impacts like what is the farm income? What are these farmers going to make on a per year basis, on an acre basis, on a county level basis? What are the kinds of things that they should look at investing in the future? What is the kind of crop mix that they will have? So these are the outputs that we have, which is quite pertinent to people who are involved in agriculture. So once we get to economic modeling, I wouldn't get into the details of that equation there, but the idea really is to get what is called net revenue. This is kind of the big takeaway from this program. net revenue is simply a function of the lot of different things that we just talked about. You know, it's a function of the water used in agriculture, the irrigation, amount of irrigation applied. It's also the crops that are grown in that area. So if it's like Hale County, if it has a mix of like cotton, corn, and maybe sorghum, what % of that is these different crops? So you put that in. Then you also apply, you know, things like cost per acre. I was talking about fuel costs and labor and seed cost and input cost. Then you apply how much is the water applied. So, you know, the pumping cost, all of that. And then obviously things like saturated thickness of the aquifer. So how much is the depth of the well? So we are also going to work with agencies like the USGS, which is the geosciences federal unit for the geosciences programs. So those things can be typically combined together, and we get what is called the net revenue, which is the final value of net returns that will be derived from this particular county by the end of the prediction period. That is the most important number. So results, if we look at that for this particular county, we saw that, as you can see, that's saturated thickness. So this is the amount of water that's available for agriculture. You can clearly see that there's going to be a decline. Why? Because after a certain time, there's going to be only so much water that can be available to pump, and then given the fuel price increases, it may not be profitable for them to pump anymore. So then you see there's like a plateau, because at this time farmers will start thinking about shifting to some crops that have less water requirements or dryland agriculture, right? So you see that decline. Now the income per year is kind of interesting. However, these are the different climate models, and as you can see, they have slight differences, but they almost follow the same trend, right? All of them see an increase in the first couple of years of the study, and that is because at that point in time, profitability is generally high because water is still available. So people start pumping, and you know, they are still also going to cover some of their fixed costs, so profitability increases as you expand your acreage. And irrigated agriculture is really expanded in that area. It has really grown from what it was at least 20 to 30% in the last 10, 15 years. And after that, quite much following the same chart, you know, you are going to go down and move into a plateau for your net revenue too per year on net returns, because after that you're going to shift to dryland agriculture or crops that do not require as much water. Okay, so this is something that we found. And if you look at the most interesting results, I think personally I felt this was the most interesting, is how the crop mix changes. Okay, so if you look at the initial year for the study, you can see that the majority of the crops there, these darker shaded regions, are cotton production which is irrigated, corn production that's irrigated, right? So majority of that acreage, about 70% was irrigated, right? By the time we get to the end of the study period, we are seeing that most of it has shifted to crops like dryland wheat and dryland sorghum. And it's quite interesting that when I did this study, that was, you know, 2013-14, and really by the time I was, you know, midway through my time here in UT Martin, a lot of my colleagues did mention that, yeah, a lot of producers started switching to these particular crops. So maybe not 100% accurate, but I think we were kind of trying to find some future projections which I think were relatively true. So a lot of producers in that area have started switching, even for cattle feed, to sorghum, which is Milo here, right, the dwarf variety of sorghum, to replace corn because it is less water intensive. It's a dryland crop, it's much more hardier, it can be used for cattle feed. A lot of producers are moving to wheat because it uses much less water. So a lot of similar kinds of issues will be seen. So this is just an example of the kind of studies that can be done with these kinds of programs together. And while we do not see so much problem with groundwater here, because obviously we are pretty fortunate to have quite a lot of surface water and we get quite a bit of rain also, right? We do have to remember that if there is a drought year, like I was saying earlier, there may be a need for water management again, and that's why a lot of producers are already thinking about investing in agricultural technologies that can conserve water. For example, they can use, you know, conservation tillage. Tennessee has always been a land for, you know, no-till agriculture. They have really taken those strategies for conserving soil, which also promotes other resource conservation. Okay, so that's a little bit about the groundwater management studies and how we are trying to apply this to the areas in Tennessee. So right now, like I was saying, we have not looked so much into the groundwater because we do not use that much here. So we are starting a new project this year, and thankfully we were very fortunate to get that funded very recently. It was a grant from the Tennessee Corn Promotion Board. So we are trying to start simulating some of the corn yields in this area and also maybe move to other crops to look at what future corn yields would look like in this area, and then maybe go from there to something similar like we did for Texas. And I have some collaborators here on that, Dr. Melhorn, Dr. Delmond, and Dr. Lepcha. And then we are also working right now with another USDA NEFA grant with Arkansas State. They are trying to really come up with some really cool, it's a pretty cool study, but it's only the second year of the study, so I'll probably have more data to share towards the end of the next year. We are doing some field trials where they are trying to see how cover crops, which are basically soil management crops, can be used to improve rice production, which is also a very water intensive crop in areas like Arkansas. So we are doing some field trials, but then we are helping with economic analysis and give like production advice to producers on how this can be profitable. So some applications of the things that we did there can also be put into practice here. So that's a little bit about the economics of groundwater management. I will switch gears now and talk about why I was talking that collaboration is so important, which is kind of the big focus of my presentation today. I really want to emphasize this, that at least in today's world, I think it's really, really important to see how nicely these things align when you're going to work with people that are involved in these different research areas. A lot of times, like I was saying, if I'm a person who works with the economic side of it, it's great to find somebody who works with the climate side of it or the agronomic side of it. And these collaborations really bring to light effective policy implications that can be used in the field, which is really, really good. So right now with the multi-institutional collaboration that I have with different schools, we are working in the area of climate literacy, because obviously I wanted to expand this to climate literacy as well on the education side. I had done quite a bit of research on the actual research side, but also wanted to include students, so I thought it couldn't be built into the climate literacy side. Agricultural sustainability, that's kind of the big focus also, and that is important to us, to the state of Tennessee obviously also, and then food security. So we are collaborating with quite a few different institutes. There's the University of Puerto Rico, Penn State, Arkansas State, Murray State, Texas Tech, and the university at Braunschweig in Germany. This is a fairly new partner. So far, just a quick overview, we have been able to get about $1.3 million from federal and state and some local sources, also sources like the Tennessee Corn Promotion Board, Soybean Board, and all of those. And I think the UTM share for this is about 65%, which is roughly about $600,000 for this. So now real quick, I thought it would be interesting to also talk about something that concerns us as people who are involved in food consumption. We are consumers too, right? We are involved in agriculture. This is a big agriculture production area, but also consumption. So a couple of years ago, I got a little grant, and that was from the UT Martin research program. So it was kind of a really nice incentive to use some students to do some research on food security in this area. So I just looked around and did some lit review. And I found a really cool program which I was not aware of until I read about it, and hopefully some of you are aware about it. It's one of the two federal nutrition programs. So one is the WIC program, which is the Women, Infant and Children, which many of you probably are familiar with. But then they also have a seniors program, which is called the Seniors Farmers Market Nutrition Program. It's a pretty interesting program, and as I started developing a little bit of research about it, I thought it would be interesting to kind of compare this program in Tennessee versus a collaborative institute in Puerto Rico, because I had a colleague who was working there. So we tried to do a comparative study and look at the perspectives of consumers and producers, which are basically vendors in the farmers market, and what they thought about these programs. Are these programs really helping them? What about the nutritional benefits? How is it helping people overall? So here's some information about that. This picture right here is from the Dyer County Farmers Market. As far as my knowledge goes today, I think this program is only operational in Shelby County, in West Tennessee, and Dyer County. These are the only two counties that we operate here in Tennessee. Of course, then it's in other parts in Middle Tennessee and East Tennessee. And this is a farmers market in Caguas, Puerto Rico, where the largest farmers market of the state or the area of Puerto Rico is generally organized. So we got to take a few students there, and obviously we needed some help from my colleague, because I'm not a native Spanish speaker, and neither was my student. She could probably manage some, but to have conversational discussions with participants, we were able to get quite a bit of support there, which was also a USDA grant through them. So it was a pretty cool experience. So really how the program works, just real quick, USDA, which is the federal agency, it allocates funds to the state agencies to run these programs. The state agency in our state here is the Tennessee Department of Health. In Puerto Rico, it's the department or the Department of Family, so the Department of Family. Okay. And then these agencies will distribute coupons to eligible seniors, and then these seniors can go to these authorized farmers markets, only to the authorized farmers market where these programs are run, to exchange these coupons for only fresh fruits and vegetables. That's the requirement there. You cannot exchange it for other things, just fresh fruits and vegetables, and for the value that the coupons are given. So typically they will give about $40 worth of coupon to one senior, which are typically in $5 increments, so 8 coupons for $5 for one person, one person. Even if there are 2 or 3 people in the household and they are all senior citizens, they'll get three sets of coupons. The eligibility for that is the recipient has to be at least 60 years and older and have to be below the 130% of the federal income poverty guidelines. Those are the 2 recipient characteristics or eligibility. And the farmer or the vendor has to first complete an application, an agreement with the Tennessee Department of Health. They have also to agree that they will not make any kind of they'll not sell any agricultural produce through wholesale distributors, and that they will have no cash change transactions. It has to be given for the whole dollar value of the coupon. No change is permitted. So what we were looking to evaluate vendor and recipient, which is the consumer perspectives, for the effectiveness of these programs in West Tennessee and Puerto Rico using primary survey data. So we surveyed both the vendors and we surveyed both the recipients in these areas. So the study locations, like I said earlier, was the Dyer County Farmers Market. I had a student worker with me, Scott Wan. He graduated a couple of years ago. He's working with the ag finance company. And then we had another student here, April, who went with us to Puerto Rico, and she was able to interview the vendors and the participants there in the program. So what are some of the findings? I'll quickly wrap this up to talk about that. Vendors, they did suggest eligible items to be included. In Puerto Rico, it was a little different. They were, the territory does allow things like honey and cheese also to be used in this program, but in Tennessee it was pretty strict to just fruits and vegetables. That's all you could buy or sell with those. And then recipients were looking for more produce availability. Now remember, in Tennessee, this is more of a seasonal nature. Farmers market are not year-round, unlike Puerto Rico, which is a much tropical area. So they operate all year round. Produce availability is more. Farmer market hours are more too. It's a much more active market there. So they were looking for more produce availability, and they were more satisfied in Puerto Rico because of year-round availability. So that's something we can work on in this particular area. It does, the recipients did agree. Quite a few seniors said that they did feel that they increased the fresh vegetable and fruits consumption just because of the program. It was also interesting to know that the Department of Health or the Department of Family in Puerto Rico are mandated by the federal government to do some sort of an educational session with the consumers when they hand out the coupon. That should include nutritional information, dietary information, maybe some recipes, so that they are not just handing out coupons, they are also making an interactive discussion with the recipients so they are able to use them in their households. So some of the seniors really thought that was beneficial to them, in terms of storing or in terms of processing, those kinds of things. And then obviously in Tennessee, it was a big constraint in terms of administrative costs. Remember that this particular program does not cover administrative costs. So it's really on a volunteer basis in some areas, especially the Department of Health. The person I was talking to here, she said they had been running it for almost 25, 30 years. And I think she's getting close to retirement. So somebody else has to pick it up. So it really has a lot of initiative that's coming from the health department to continue running a program like that. So those were some of the feedback that we got. And then one interesting thing which I also found in Puerto Rico was there was quite a few female vendors that actually said, oh yeah, this program is great, because of this particular program we have really been able to expand our production, because they were female owners and they were really starting off like last 5 or 7 years, and just because this program was, they were able to use this program and participate in it, their sales were really benefiting from that program. So which was kind of nice, having that involvement of women in agriculture in that particular area. It was a boost to them in one way, which was nice to hear. So that's about the research with the Farmers Market Program. Now, I will briefly just talk about the UTM Mobile Energy Classroom. This is also a USDA NEFA funded project with the capacity building grants. Dr. Winters has been really supportive and helpful with telling us about this program. I think he introduced this. I had not heard about this before. We were doing a lot of like ARS and other kinds of grants in Texas. So this was a newer program, and I think we have really been fortunate to receive quite a few of these grants. And it's just me. There's a lot of other colleagues too in my department who have been who who have been involved with this with other institutions. So this is a great program for us. It's specifically called the non-land grant colleges of ACT. So it's exclusively for programs like ours, colleges like ours, which are non-land grants. So very, very, very useful grant opportunity. So as part of this, a couple of years ago, Dr. John Cole, he's our ag engineer, and Dr. Paula Gale and myself, we put together this little project, and we hoped that it would get funded, and they did fund it, and we kind of developed this mobile energy classroom, which I thought was a good initiative in this area, because we were able to take this round to events. Instead of people coming to us, we were able to go to them in classrooms, K-12 events, all these different events, and we were able to talk to people about renewable energy and how can we use this for education. So we were going to even little kindergarten kids and talking to them about little things that you can do with like solar power and all those kinds of things. So it was pretty interesting. It was very, very interactive. We enjoyed doing this, and a lot of students were involved with that. So I think it was a great student-centered research project. They also did some surveys that we were able to present at conferences and things. So it was concluded 2 years ago. And once it was concluded, then we thought about expanding this to more on the climate literacy side, and that's the time when myself, Dr. Melhon, Dr. Joey Melhon, and Dr. Mark Simpson, we collaborated with Murray State, and we wrote this little proposal on climate literacy. The first year we weren't funded, the second year we were, thankfully. So this was a project where we were trying to improve climate education in this area, or climate change education in this area, but with a specific focus on K-12 system, with dual credit students, with educators, with ACT teachers, and also with just anybody who would be involved with FFA, 4-H, all those events. So we called it the CLASS project, which stands for Climate Literacy for Agriculture and Sustainable Societies. The purpose of this program was threefold. We were hoping to introduce climatology, meteorology, and climate impacts curriculum in the local area high schools in the service area of UT Martin and Murray State. So it was a two-state collaborative grant. And then another objective was to provide workshops in climate education for K-12 educators, people involved in agribusiness, and the general public. And a big focus definitely was to use build capacity, use funds to build capacity for research focusing on students in the area of climate science and agriculture. So these were the three things that we did with this grant. So this was basically going to be a three-pronged approach, if you will, education, research, and outreach. For the purpose of this talk, I'll mainly talk about research, but we do have education objectives, like including dual credit curriculum to area high schools, and then outreach with the other events that we were talking about. So through curriculum development, just real quick, we developed these web-based dual credit courses. So depending on what specialty area we were in, I'm an ag economist, so a lot of my specialty is economic models, economic impacts, talking about how costs and production can be affected by climatic events and what producers can do to mitigate it. Dr. Melhon specializes a lot in policy, so he did a lot of modules with policy, and then Dr. Simpson is our meteorologist and climatologist in this area, so he did the science part of it. So the three of us, we collaborated and we developed these dual credit modules, and we broadcasted this in high schools in Kentucky and Tennessee, and also undergraduate and graduate level courses. So the latest figure that I got was about 730 students throughout Kentucky and Tennessee were able to benefit it just for the dual credit, and this does not include the undergraduate and graduate students. These are the students that are mainly with the dual credit programs in the two states of our collaboration. And something like this, the module would look something like this, and then there'll be like an interactive, pretty similar to the kind of online classes that we have here, but some sort of an interactive activity and some sort of an assessment that'll give them that exposure early on to the area of climate change, agriculture, and economics. So that was some of the things we did education-wise, outreach-wise, and this is my favorite part of this whole grant really, because I love working with these high school kids. They are so interested in some of the things that we do. We developed this really cool game called the Climate Wedges game. Dr. Simpson and myself, we came up with this idea of developing a Climate Wedges game where we kind of gave them a worksheet and they would work in groups and present it at different events like the 4-H and the FFA events that we have on campus, or we go to retreats and areas where these events happen. And these students will come up with these strategies of how you can use some of these existing technologies, like renewable energy, or maybe biofuels, or maybe trying to improve, emissions and some other things that can help reduce the carbon footprint in agriculture. So they would come up with this, and then they would have a little contest that would help out with that. So, just to give them some sort of a competitive, environment while they were working on it. So it's pretty cool and they really enjoyed it. I try to sometimes do it with some of my classes, but with high school kids it was really fun. We had a great time doing that with them. And then some local and global interactions with this particular project. A lot of our students were able to present it at international conferences like the Canadian Ag Economics Society and the International Conference on Climate Change. And also as local events, we were able to also present it to the local clubs here and also at some of the retreats. So there's been some international exposure for our students as well. Now mainly about student involvement, we were able to fund quite a few students as student workers and also a couple students for their graduate theses, which are just going to be wrapped up this summer, I'm hopeful, who are working on projects that are funded by this particular grant. We were also able to hire 2 students from computer science. That was amazing. They built this really cool website for us, so I was happy to not have to hire an outside web designer and got some, students who were experts, and they came up with this really cool website from the computer science, and they designed this project website for us. And it's the link is provided here if anybody's interested. I'll be happy to share it after the talk. We also sent a lot of students to farmers that were able to do focus group discussions and projects with farmers both in Murray State and here, and they were able to interview farmers about how they thought their operations have changed over the last 20-30 years depending on a changing climate. Kentucky is very different than us. It's just across the state line, but we have a lot of different agriculture. So it's very interesting to see those comparisons and students trying to learn about that. I'll just quickly go over also some student research, some recent highlights. These are some of our students who are getting close to graduation or have graduated, and what are some of the things that they've done with this project. One of our students, Abby Sartain, and her husband, they are actually hog farmers right outside of Sharon, but she hopes to also work in the ag finance area fairly soon. She graduated a couple of years ago. She was actually able to get out a journal article from her study, which was trying to see what college students thought about financial contributions towards mitigating climate change related efforts. So she just interviewed college students in different courses and departments, and she did some research about that. So she presented it at a few different conferences locally and regionally. Then we have these 2 students who are seniors, Montana Wright and Anna Gafford. Montana is a wet science major, Anna is an agribusiness student, and they are both going to graduate hopefully this summer or this spring and then maybe next summer. So both of them are working in areas of their individual interest. Montana is wet science, so she tried to look into how livestock auction bids are impacted by climatic parameters. What kind of decisions do agricultural producers in the livestock area have to face when they are thinking about weather and climate, and how does that affect their things about climate, the livestock insurance, or how it affects their futures trading or commodities trading for that particular area. And Anna is working on studying carbon emissions through conventional and no-till management in West Tennessee. So as some of you who are familiar with agriculture probably know that this is a big no-till state. So she's trying to compare that and see what are some results. And they just presented it at the Southern Association of Ag Economists meetings in New Orleans last month. We also have 2 graduate students who are currently working on it. A couple of them have graduated recently, but they are hopefully going to finish up soon. Erin Barnes, she is working on preserving water quality in the Mid-South, and she's trying to interview producers in this area to see how they are willing to, or how and to what extent are they willing to adopt alternative agricultural practices that can improve water quality. So she's interested more on the quality side, so that's where she's trying to work in. And then Tamara is working on soil carbon markets. As some of you probably may have heard, that carbon sequestration, which is basically getting carbon in the ground, can also be a potential strategy to mitigate carbon emissions. So she's looking into some of that, and what are some of the perceptions of producers in this area about such strategies to be incorporated in agriculture. And then we also have some really wonderful international students that I ran across on campus one day, and we just talked, and they were interested in some research like that. They are here for about a year, so it's kind of sad to see them go in a couple of months. That they have been really wonderful working with this project. They are actually future teachers in Germany. Hopefully they'll finish up here their master's thesis and get to teach K through 12, I think grades 1st through 8th, I think they are going to teach in Germany, and they wanted to learn and do some research about how they can use environmental and sustainability issues in the English speaking classroom in Germany, because they also teach physical education and English. So that's what they're working on. And then they went with us for this meeting and tried to also interview the academic community in general and see what they thought about it, and they want to compare it with people in Germany think about it. So something like that they are working on currently right now, and they are from the University of Braunschweig, who are also supported by this project. And then one last thing that we did last summer as we were wrapping up this grant, we were really hoping to do this in person, but COVID really put a damper on our plans, but we were hoping that let's get this done one way or the other. So we partnered with Penn State last year with their Global Teach Ag Network. They are a big organization in that area. They really work with ag educators and a lot of international agencies and institutes for promoting agricultural education. So we partnered with them, and they helped us organize the first ever secondary educators conference in the region, which emphasized climate change education. And they were also able to, UT Martin was also able to provide continuing education credits to the agricultural teachers who were interested. So that included about 11.5 hours of programming. It was a 3-day conference, which included, panels, speakers, and keynote speakers, a lot of different discussions, games, challenges that we could probably give them as tools that they could include in their classrooms. So they were able to take that back, and they could, use that in their classroom, all these ag teachers. And there were about 54 attendees from the states of Tennessee, Texas, Kentucky, Penn State, Pennsylvania, and Alabama. These were the number of people that participated. And this is kind of just a little brochure we designed, and our computer science students were obviously helping us. So like I said, collaboration is the way to go. So yeah, it's just, it was a good event, and we really enjoyed this experience together. So looking to the future, I want to wrap this up as we talk about climate and agriculture. So I think everybody would agree that this is an area that we all are concerned with in one way or the other. Everybody's got to eat. Food is important to us. Water is the life of agriculture. So, and the future climate impacts are going to impact people in different ways. Just maybe the scale or the magnitude may be different, but everybody is affected by it. So I think the consciousness about it is very important, and having the right knowledge. And there's no need for really, having much of a discussion in terms of whether this is true or not. It's more about getting the facts, right? It's more about learning the science behind it, trying to see what the science says, and then you can make decisions about it. So that's what our idea behind this grant was, to provide people with the resources and the science and the information that is out there, and then provide them with the resources they can use. And it was a good place to start, because K through 12 is where all this can be incorporated early on in the education system. So we are hoping to continue collaboration with the class project with all these different universities and programs that we were partnered with, and now we want to include sustainability issues. So there's a few different grants that are in review, and if they are funded, that would be some really cool projects. We are also hoping to do some smallholder farms, farmer trainings, and some international field school exchange programs. We are trying to partner with some universities in South America and see if this project is funded, we'll be able to take a few producers from here in Tennessee to those areas and bring them back here for like a mutual exchange program to see what they are growing, how their production practices are, and how can you be more sustainable in the long run. And then, of course, I want to continue collaborating with other disciplines. So anybody here from a different discipline who is interested in collaboration, please reach out. That's something I always love to work with. It's so amazing for our students. It's amazing for us as faculty. And it really helps us grow as a community. And I think that's what we are all here for, right? Students and teachers and everybody else involved in agriculture, in academia. That's what we are here for, sharing and imparting the knowledge base to the next generation. That's kind of our end goal. So thank you all for being patient listeners. I hope I did not put anybody to sleep yet, but I tried my best. So thank you, I appreciate that. And I'll leave you all with this quote by Ben Franklin: "When the well is dry, we do know the worth of water." So I think I always remember that. So thank you. I can take any questions if there are.
Any questions for Dr. Tewari?
Yes.
Of all these many projects and research that you've worked on, what has been your favorite?
I think my favorite definitely has been the class project. Of course, it was most recent, but because it involved students so much, that's why it was so I think so engaging, because they were able to use these opportunities and these resources to come up with their own research ideas, which I think was very, very gratifying, and I think it was very engaging. And then working with the high school students through that was amazing as well. Yeah.
Other questions? Great. Well, I know that Dr. Tewari is going to be here for a few moments. If you're too shy to ask a question here live, please come on up and have a word with her. As she said, she's looking for research partners, not just faculty members, but students. So if you have an idea of something that falls within this realm, it's a good opportunity to talk to her about those ideas. So again, thank you to everyone who helped to make the event possible. We've had about 10 on our live stream, so thank you for joining us there. The presentation has been recorded and will be available on our YouTube stream as well. So perhaps you can give one last show of your appreciation for Dr. Tewari's time today.